This is Gemara Sanhedrin Daf Chof Test, and all the learning for this month. The month of Teves has been generously sponsored as Lezchot Aliyas Neshama for Reb Aryeh ben Ya'akov V'siyata D'Shmaya. The Koyach HaTorah should continue to elevate his Neshama higher and higher in Gan Eden Shel Meila. As well as learning should be an incredible schos for Tinoik ben Miriam Ahuva. We should continue seeing successes and growths, and ultimately the refuah shalema b'karif. We're only on Chav Chesed and Beis. We're approximately 20 lines from the bottom. The first line is Yosi. Says the Gemara, Hi matanasa levechatim alei trei gisi. There was a certain matana that two brothers-in-law, two brothers-in-law, the husbands of two sisters, signed on it. Savar Rav Yosef lachshurei. Rav Yosef thought it's kosher. Why would it be kosher? Damar Rav Yudah Amar Shmuel, as we just saw, lachikir Rav Yosef, and Rav Yosef was of the opinion that brothers-in-law are not pasol leidos. Why? Because they're not going to inherit one for another. How do you know that he's passing Rav Yosef the Mishnah the Machshir begisai? Tell me Rav Yosef the Braisa the apostle begisai. Answers the Gemara lo salgadet. Don't think that. Damar Shmuel kuganano Pinchas. Why not? Because Shmuel explained what types of brothers-in-law are pasol eidos, like I and Pinchas, who are brothers and brothers-in-law. For we see from there, Davion Achi Vigisi. We see the reason is because they are both brothers and brothers-in-law. Gisi the Alma. But brothers-in-law in general, Shaber Dami, are allowed to testify. Abaye says no. The Dilma, but perhaps gonna know Pinchas Mishum de Gisai. Maybe he meant like I and Pinchas that are the cases of a Gisai Kamar. Amalei Zil Kanye. Rav Yossi therefore says Zil Kanye be'edei Mesira. So Rav Yossi says that maybe this is not a good star, and therefore go and be kaina with Eidei Mesira ki Rav Elazar, as is the opinion of Rav Elazar, who says Eidei Mesira is enough to machshir a get. Ask the Gemara further. 1 second, says Abaye, even Rav Elazar that holds that a star, you could machshir a star with Eidei Mesira. They saw you giving it over, but ask Abaye, wait. Rav Abba taught us if it's mizuyav mitoicha, if the document itself shows it's possible, it's signed by Kroivim, it's possible. So responds the Gemara, Amar le zolo shavkili tasvune lecha. Responds Rav Yosef, God, they're not going to allow me to give it to you. Why? Because lemaisa, these edim are worthless and are possible at best, and therefore it would not work to even give over the shtar. Rav Yudah Omer, quoting the next part of the Mishnah, says the Gemara, Amar Rav Tanchan, Amar Tavla, Amar Bruna, Amar Rav Lachik, Rav Yudah, we paskin like Rav Yehuda, that if a daughter is niftaras and the sons-in-law have children, they are still considered related to the grandfather. Rav Amar Rav Nachanin Lachik, Rav Yudah, V'chein Amar Rav Chanan, Amar Rav Yechanin Lachik, Rav Yudah. So machlekes, so we pass like Rav Yudah. Some learn this in Rav Chana on the following: Ezu darash Rav Yossi darshin zawat ubasa, 3 lines from the bottom. Elakanim elvim el shevet sheyabe amheim. They should come to the Hanan. They should come for the judges that were there in those days. Ask the Gemara, the famous Kash of Chisal al Daitoch, do you think of what? He could go to a Shayfet who's not in his days? Of course not. So why does the Pasuk explicate? There has to be a Shayfet. It has to be someone who's around in his days. What it means is referring to someone who was a relative and becomes unrelated. And in that case, says the pasuk that it has to do with who in that time is related. And if they're not, then they're allowed to serve as Eidim. Amar Rav Rachan, the last son of Yechal, we paskin like Rav Yossi Agalili. And we begin with his story. B'nei Chamua de Mar Ukva, the son-in-law of Mar Ukva's father, as we turn over to Chavtesam and Aleph, Karaivim v'nisrachlu havi. They were Karaivim, and subsequently they were distanced one from another. Asli kamei didina. So they came in front of him for din. Amar le Mar Ukva said to them, "What should I tell you?" Said Mar Ukva, "Still no chaladina. I'm still puzzled to don your case." Amrulei my daitach. What's the reason? You think Rav Yehuda, you're like Rav Yehuda, that if there are children left, it contains, and it's considered like they're still related. Anan my sinon agirta mimarava. Said, you're telling me like Rav Yehuda, but I'll tell you, we have a letter from those Marava in the West Eretz Yisrael. They know like Rav Yehuda. So Amr lo, so Mar Ukva says, Atu bekavod yikira, itvakunu becho. Says Mar Ukva, was I permanently glued with a kav of wax and I married your sister? No, when she died, we're not related anymore. Excuse me. Toloi kamina, that we should not say b'zul mulcha ledina. Amisham toloi tzaytziyot ledina. Says the Gemara, I am not possible to this. However, other than the fact that you're not going to listen to me because you feel that I am your peer, but therefore, responds Rav Yosef, this is how we would deal with the above quandary. Continues the Gemara at the two dots at the end of the narrow lines. What is considered one's ayavim, his sheshbina, his groomsman, etc. Says the Gemara v'kama, and how long is this groomsman considered possible eidos for the husband? Not just the 7 days, but even the first day, he's going to be kosher le'idos. Once the chasna ends. An enemy is one who does not speak to someone else for 3 days. Says the Gemara. Says the Gemara, and he was not his enemy. What do we learn out? Only one who's not an enemy could testify. And he does not seek after his misfortune. It says the Gemara again. You have to judge him, don't seek out his misfortune. Says where do we see in the pasuk that a saine is going to be pasleidus? Where do we see similar if someone is ayavai? Says the Gemara, karle bahachi behachi, read as follows: vulay ayev lai. The way that we read is vulay ayev lai, and if neither was his ayev, vulay ayev lai, there neither is ayev nor is ayev. Continues the Gemara of Lomavakish Asai, not one who seeks out misfortune, not the benefit. Then you're able to judge him. Mide Ayiv Ksiv, says the Gemara. Wait, such a thing written in the Pasuk El Svaru. Ayiv my time we should Ayiv not make Harvey daite. For Rabbanan, Hailo Ayiv Lai, Lomavakish Asai, my Darshi Bechad, Ledayan, Idach Yadanim of Israel Yehuda, Bahu Lai Ayiv Lai, Lomavakish Asai. Mikan, if they don't see along in other areas, they cannot sit on one din Torah. And we continue with the Mishnah. How do we check the Eidim? They bring him into a room and they cause them fear. And they send everyone outside as I gadol shabehem, they keep only the most gadol, the most prominent of all the edim. They tell him, how do you know? And if he says, Amar li, he told me he's chayiv. Ishwani Amar li shechayiv, or someone else said such. Loimer klum, it's meaningless. Until he says, in front of us, he admitted, shuchayiv loimer zayim zuz. They bring the second aid. They both tell the same story. So they go back and forth, trying to make sure that the stories match up one to the other. That's how we choose Eidim. Continues the Gemara. What about the Dayanim? If to say that the person is Zakai, is not liable. What's the halacha? Zakai. If it's 2 verse 1, chayiv. Echad Amar Chayiv, Echad Amar Zakeh, Filu Shnayim is Zakeh, Shnayim Chayiv, if it's a split vote. V'Echad Amar Eini Yodeam, what do? Yosifu Adayanim, we add on a dayan. Kamuras Adavar, says the Mishnah, when they finish and they paskin, they would bring into the greatest of all the Gayanim, and he would say, Ish ploini atazaka, ish ploini atachayf. Uminayin, and concludes the Mishnah, where do we know? That when a dayan leaves the courtroom, he should not say to either of the litigants, by the way, ani mizakeh, I vote in your favor, which I do the other ones are greater than me. Nemar, and this it says, so even when one's leaving a entire, one has to be utterly cognizant of the power and the care that he must give to his words. We continue with the Gemara. Hey, how do they tell them? How do they try to intimidate the witnesses? Amar Rav Yehuda. They say as follows: Ayin, excuse me, cloud and wind, but ayin. Ish misalel b'misas b'matas sheker. Person takes pride in a mata sheker, and a gift that is not honorable. Amar Rava Yachli Meimar. Amar Le Rava. Rava says Yachli Meimar. The Edom can say Shav Shani Avikafa. There was a 7-year famine. Va'ababa imana lo yichalef, but does not enter the craftsman's door. Basically explaining that they can rely on their own food, but that warning is not enough to deter the potential false aid. Amar Rav Ashi Yachle Meimar Shev Shani, says Rav Ashi, you're able to say Shev Shani, let them Shev Shemi Avi my son, excuse me. There may be a 7-year famine. Ve'inish b'loy shaniya loy shachif, and a person without years prematurely lo shachif, death of course is preordained. Elam Rav Ashi Amar Li Nasan Bar Mar Zutra Amrinalu Sadi Shakri or Gayu. Thus Zutri said to me, we tell the Edim Sadi Shakri false Edim are Gayu are terrible in the eyes of those who hire them. We have to be careful who we're representing and making sure that we do so in the most appropriate manner. Continues the Gemara, quoting the Mishnah, Amar Hu Amar Li, it's nothing. In front of us, they admitted, continues the Gemara, Messiah Le Rav Yehuda. Let's bring a right to Rav Yehuda. Rav Yehuda Rav Sach She'amar Atemi Dai. Tanami Rav Chiva Rav Rav Yochanan. Manli Yocham Li Hin Lamach Amar Lo Tanuli Amar Rav Shatani Bacha Potter. Tanami Yachim Manli Bach Amar Lo Hin Lamachar Amar Lo Tanieli Amar Lo Mishatani Bacha was joking. Potter, he's going to be Potter because the Taina of Mishat Taina of Manli Biyadcha. He could indeed say that Mishata ani bach. La'id alafilu, says the Gemara. Hakamin la'idim achari yader. V'amrla manali v'chamar la'i resancha shataydim of neblani ublani amar la'i. Misyari, I'm afraid I need Shavi Achbeno Ladin. We will bring the court to court. Lamach amar la'i. Tinehu li amar la'i. Mishata ani bach pater. V'intan it's meisis ma lemesis. Mesis man the Shemaya. You don't make your own time. Oh, we didn't have Fasha. When it comes to capital crimes, we should make up for him. Mesis, why is it Mesis different? Listen to me, that I know what's going on. Says the Gemara, the Rachmana Amar, says the Torah. Do not have compassion, you should not turn over. How do we know that we don't take for them? Because Lenachash Hakad money. Why did he not ask questions? What should he have done? Divrei Atav, Divrei Atam, Divrei Mishaimim, Divrei Rav Shaimim, Amar Chizki, V'nayin Shekol HaMaisiv Goreah, Shenemar, Amar Lakim Lasechel Menav Lasigubo. Amar Vishasha Amar V'Halcha Masayim V'Chetzi Arka. Rav Ashi Amar Asati Asar Yerios. Amar Rei Loshana Allah Damar Mishatani Yibach. Aval Amar Lahadam. Then Hochsekun Kafron. Lahadan saying never happened. That's grounds for calling the person into a Hochsekun Kafron. And we continue on the top of Chavtes Amid Beis. Continues the Gemara on the top line. Not everyone agrees. Amarav Papa Breider Avacha Bariada Hachi Amrina Mishmei Derava Call Mili Dechti Loye Dekiri Inchi. Arguing on the previous opinion, but rather Call Mili Dechte, anything which is of meaningless, of no reason one could forget, and therefore he could forget that which happened prior. Says the Gemara a bit of a story. 4 lines down. There was a person who hid eidim lechavre bechlise bekilte behind the curtains. Amar le manali biadcha. The first one said yom $100. Amar le hein yes. Amar iri v'shachli lahave alach sadi. You could send the walking and the sleeping shall be the eidim, the fact that you're here. Amar le loy. Amar avkana. Amar le loy. He said he's not believed. Therefore, you cannot use these eidim to say, oh no, he was maiden. No, it doesn't work that way. Similar story. Someone hid eidim in the graveyard to hear his friend admit. Amar le manali amar le hein chaye mesi chaye. Umesi lavi alach sadi, the living and dead shall be eidim. Amar leiloi, Amar Rav Shimon, Amar leiloi, and therefore, in as much as it wasn't just the dead that could be the eidim, the Mises guy was hiding, he cannot serve as an aid. Amar Ravina v'itemer Rav Papa, Shema mina meha. I'll bring you a raya. The Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav Zach Amar Atem Meida. You have to say and appoint that you are me'idim, and only in such a scenario would, if someone admits in front of them, would it then be good? Lo shanuki amar loiva v'lashnaki amar malva. Either one, the malva or loiva, are able to say. Aval, however, lo shamar loiva lo shnaki amar malva v'shasik loiva taima damar loiva taima. Tamar loy. So we see the fact that he said that him being moited does not work is because he said loy. Aval, however, ishasik, if he acquiesced that okay, no problem, hachinami, then it would work for them to be eidim. Says the Gemara, similar story. We're about 20 lines down. The first one on line is hachanami. Says the Gemara, aho davikar le kav rishu. There was someone that they called him as Kav, which is a measurement, Rishu of that. Amar man maisik. So he said, man masik bi ella ploini, uploini. Who has a claim against me? Only pliny, meaning a form of admission. Asu tavula dina. So they call this guy into Bezdin. Kamei Rav Nachman, Amar Rav Nachman, Adam. Also, no, we cannot use his words in order to make himself chayev shvu. And a similar story, there was someone that they called him in a not nice way. A mouse who sleeps on dinarim. He was a miser that he didn't use his money. He goes shachev when he was dying. Amar plania masku pei zuzi. Someone said such money is owed to me. After he dies, that's from the Yarshim. He come to claim for the Yarshim. Asli kamei. There was Rav Yossi Amrlo. Ki Amrina Adam Asli Shlolash Bias Atzmai. Ani Mili Mechayim Avlachar Moisai. That's only that one cannot make himself Chayiv Shvua while he's alive. And Achar Moisai Parip Alga. Says the Gemara. So the Yarshim paid half. Tavua Ledina Leidach Palga. And they came to claim the other half. Also, they come to Rav Chia. They come run to Rav Chia in order to judge the case. Amrlo Kishem Adam Asli Shalaz Bias Atzai Kach Adam Asli Shalaz Bias Banav. He can't cause his children to swear. Amrle Nezel v'Nahader. So he said, shall we go out and come back and get the money back? Amrlo Kvar Hayra Zakin. I'm sorry, but the Zakin Rav Yishmael Rav Yesi already paskind that you do not have to return the money, and therefore you will not have to do it now. Says the Gemara, Hoideb if Neishayim become Vikanu Miyad. Says the Gemara, a new case, a first cousin to the previous cases. But if one admitted in front of two Eidim, and then he made a kinyan to show that his Aidah is real Aidah, says the Gemara, Kaisvin, they can write down his admission, they don't even have to ask. Vim Lavin, if not, Ein Kaisim. Bivnei Shleisha, a similar case. What happens if someone admits to something in front of three people, there was no kinyan? Ravami or Kaisim, Ravasi or Ein Kaisim. Have Ovda V'chashalah. There was a story. And Rav went with Ravasi in such a scenario, and he did not allow them to write down the fact that he was Maidan. We conclude, says the Gemara, Ein Kaisin Havi Ovda V'chashla Rav Ravasi. Amar Rav Rava Hoidisa Zimnin Kasvinu. This admission sometimes is written down as Zimnin like Kasvinin. Kan Kinife V'yasi like Kasvinan. If the three people gathered together were sitting, then they cannot write it down. Whereas Kanfiyu Kasvinan. Whereas if they first were gathered together and only afterwards they admit, then you write it down. Rav argues. Avilu Kanfayu. Even if they were gathered then together still, like Kasvina, we do not write it down. Ad Amar until it is Ad Amar Lahu Have Alai Dayan, until he appoints them particularly to be the Dayanim, whereas on this, Mar Ravashi Amar, no, Afilu Amar Havali Dayan, look, as we do not write it until when? Adekavi Dochta Vishalchu Mizamnin Lei Lebei Dino. We only write it down until what? They establish the Dayanim and they send them to appear in court. Then he admits, then we'll write down his admission, but we're saying it's not so pashit, the fact that someone admits that we can then obligate it based on his admission. We'll pick it up from here, B'siyata Dishmaya.